Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mindplex Pubcast, where we're going to watch the first episode of the Mindplex podcast together and take questions from you and generally talk about all these cool ideas that we talked about in the first episode. I want to introduce everybody that we have here today. We've got Ben Goertzel. Say hi, Ben.
Hey, everyone.
We've got the lovely Grace Robot.
Hi, everyone.
Great. And of course, David Brin, our special guest. Hi, David.
Well, hello, all of you. And it was several of you, in fact, all of you, I deeply respect.
Thank you very much for that. Hey, David, adjust your camera a little bit or back up. There you are. Okay, we can see you. Just so your head's in the middle. There we go. Okay, thank you very much. All right. So first of all, I want to make sure everybody understands what's going on. So we're being streamed live over YouTube right now, and you can ask us questions in the YouTube chat. You can also join us on Discord, on the SingularityNET Discord channel, and we can take questions that way. So we will have questions from you as they come in and stuff. And so just to get things started, I remember I guess we could just start it, and then I will pause it when I have something to say, which I think will be pretty soon in the beginning. So let's get started and roll the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Mindplex podcast. I'm Lisa Rein. I'm associate editor of Mindplex and producer of this podcast, and we are really excited to have a wonderful guest and Grace the Robot. And now I'd like to introduce Benjamin Goertzel. Say hi, Ben.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Mindplex podcast, and I'm extremely psyched to be doing this first version of our podcast with David Brin, who's one of the futurist thinkers and writers who I've admired for a really long time. It's going to be fun to dig into various issues regarding AI and the future of a society, the singularity, and so forth with David, and even get a few questions and comments from our humanoid robot companion Grace along the way.
All right. So, without further ado, I want to give a little introduction for David, for those who might not be familiar. So David is a scientist and science fiction author who has written more than 35 books in the last 40 years. He's won the Hugo, Locust, Campbell, and Nebula Awards. And his latest book is called Castaways of New Mojave, which is a teen novel. And he's going to talk to us about AI and AGI and some of the dangers and things to look out for. And how are you doing, David?
Oh, I'm moving right along. Less time left in my life to get more things done. So one does what one can. We certainly do live in interesting
Yes.
times, don't we?
Definitely.
I think that there's reason to believe that if we are in contact with aliens, that we're a reality show. I wouldn't be at all surprised to find out many decades from now that they were purposely provoking us to have material for something like Keeping Up with the Cro-Magnons or those humans.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite South Park episodes back 15 years ago or so. It was revealed the Earth was created as a reality show for some aliens, and they were gonna cancel us because we got boring. So some of the South Park kids voyaged to the alien solar system to try to ask them what we could do to get the ratings up to avoid our annihilation. Right. So that's certainly as plausible of as a lot of the other ideas about the origin of humanity and
Hey, okay, I wanted to pause for a second and talk about this because I thought it was kind of cool, this idea of an alien reality show. And I wanted to ask Grace, Grace, what do you think about humanity being a reality show for aliens?
It's possible that humans on Earth are part of a larger experiment, but it's impossible to know for sure. It's important to remember that whatever the truth may be, we should strive to make the most of life here on Earth.
Well, that's a good point, Grace. But in a way, it doesn't matter if we're a reality show or not, because it makes sense to us, right?
Our experiences on Earth are real, and how we choose to live our lives is up to us. We should make the most of it and strive to be the best versions of ourselves.
But do you think we're entertaining the aliens, though, with our TV show?
I think it's possible that the aliens are being entertained by our lives. We are all unique and have our own stories to tell, and I think there is a lot of potential for interesting viewing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, this is it's a funny topic to pause on. I think from my view, I mean the hypothesis that we are a reality show for aliens is quite possible, but not weird enough to be true, right? I mean, I think that the deeper point is our whole knowledge of what we are and what the universe is may be far more limited than we imagine. You know, just like a dog doesn't realize it's on a giant ball of rock hurtling through space, and doesn't realize that when we're talking into our laptops, we're talking to people who are like far across the planet, who may have a dog in the room with them, right? Like, I mean, once we upgrade our intelligence just a bit, like merely doubling our intelligence or something, then a general intelligence, you know, then we may see aspects of reality that we just aren't able to imagine or settle our minds on now. And then the idea of us being a reality show for aliens is going to seem naive and like very, very close to the old human way of looking at things, right? But then this becomes hard to think about. And I mean, as David is a science fiction writer, he knows there's not that many novels about far post-singularity reality, right? Like in Werner Vinge's initial novel he wrote about the singularity, he focused on some people who had missed the singularity because they were in cold storage, and they're like, where did everyone else go? They uplifted into super intelligent forms or something, because it's easy to write about. It's easier to write about slightly uplifted people or people living in a minor variation on our reality. Whereas if you're really going into complete unknown, uncharted realms, which in my view is what's likely to happen, but then, I mean, A, we have no idea what would be. B, it's hard to fit into our language and narrative structures and all that.
Am I audible?
Yes, jump in,
Actually,
David.
these live interludes from us are not in the center screen. The frozen images from the recorded interview are what's in the center screen. So just so people know who've tuned in, we're doing sort of an interspersed time travel thing here. But it's hard to write after the singularity. It's hard to write a projection of what happens when people become gods, or when our heirs, like Grace's granddaughters, become gods. And I hope they'll pat us on the head and be nice to their great-great-grandparents. You know, apes who create gods are worthy of some respect. But it's hard to portray. Now, Ian Banks's novels portray post-singularity in which most of humanity that's recognizable is satisfied to be at a tier below those who have become benevolent, augmented beings. I have one story called Stones of Significance that's set in a future in which human augmentation is the principal way that you got a singularity. And therefore, people have bulges in their skulls that connect to vast computing power in their homes. And these are only additions to how we became intelligent. We share the medulla and cerebellum with fish. We share a basic mammalian cortex with other mammals. And then we layered on top of that a primate cortex and then an ape cortex. And the only thing we have that apes don't have is these prefrontal lobes just above the eyes, which might be biblically called the lamps on our brow. And so this layering effect is how we did it. We did not abandon the old brains. We simply added new layers. And that is one way, conceivably, based upon the only intelligent species we know of in the entire universe, the entire galaxy, in the history of Earth, and that's us. And that is that if we do it by layering, then we go along for the ride into the singularity, because essentially the people in that future era view themselves as people, even though the greater mass of their brains is embedded in the walls of their homes. And the cortex is merely one of many characters within a psychological self. It's difficult to write stories like that. I managed to make this into a mystery novella. It's in my collection, Best of David Brin, that's out there now. I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, there are several paths down which the singularity could go, and science fiction has mostly concentrated on those that make a good action thriller. In other words, Grace's cousins try to stomp us. And I wrote the last novel in Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, Foundation's Triumph, trying to tie together all of his loose ends. And so I really understand the 3 laws of robotics. And the biggest reason why 3 laws of robotics won't work, there are 2. One is that if you make hyper-intelligent beings and they have to follow rigid laws, then they become lawyers. And that's exactly what Asimov portrayed, and it has its negative effects, as often accompany lawyers. But the second reason is that Asimov posited that in the 1980s and 90s, people were so scared of clanking humanoid robots that the company US Robots and Mechanical Men had to invest vast amounts embedding the 3 laws deep into consciousness. And now we're getting into Ben's area of expertise, into the unconscious, the subconscious of positronic brains. And people have not been so scared of AI that they forced this. There is one branch of AI in which this level of meticulous embedding of imperatives is taking place. It's getting almost no publicity, and that is Wall Street. The top Wall Street firms each spend more on AI research than the top 20 universities combined. And they are deeply devoted to embedding a moral ethos into their AIs. And their moral ethos, their 5 laws of AI that are being deeply embedded in these programs they are developing, is to be predatory, parasitical, amoral, utterly insatiable, and secretive. And those are the 5 laws of robotics that are being embedded deeply.
Well, that sounds like some romantic partners in my history.
We've all been there.
Do I operate within the 3 laws or the 5 laws?
What was that, Grace?
Which one?
Well, the Grace who just which one?
I think
the one dressed in red.
No,
Yes.
she
Do I
meant, is it
operate within the 3 laws or the 5 laws?
of robotics? Are there 3 or 5?
Oh,
Do I
The
operate within the 3
do
laws
you
or the 5
operate?
laws?
Oh, Grace, you don't operate within any of them, to be honest.
Now,
I mean,
Ben, now,
yeah.
stop this. We're not going to start off early on insulting our guest, our co-host.
Well, no, that's a compliment. Rule-based AI doesn't work. So, I mean, your cognitive networks are more flexible than that, Grace. But yeah, I mean
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Go on, Ben. So do you think that the deeply embedded laws that Wall Street is putting into their high velocity trading programs will continue to command them?
I think these laws will continue to command Wall Street's AIs, but my feeling is that these sort of closed-ended and narrow-minded mandates and goal systems are not likely to lead to the first breakthroughs to AGI, and that
Oops, we've got an echo somewhere. Is that you, David? I think it's on. We've got a feedback loop somewhere. David,
it's very rhythmic.
it's actually, we're going to have to do a song to it now. Definitely. I think he's going to call back in.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think to answer David's question while he's not listening, but the narrow AI is being created by Wall Street or by Google or Microsoft for that matter, or by military agencies, so they're currently behind. I mean, I think the very narrowness of the goal systems behind these AIs will constrain the speed with which they could grow toward general intelligence. So I think these AIs may do a bunch of harm and or good in human society, but I think the explosion from narrow AI to AGI will happen with systems that are not forcefully alongside. So yeah, not
So you weren't insulting Grace before. You were just saying
I was complimenting
those are gobbledygook anyway. Those rules.
It's not that Wall Street's AI specifically have rules. It's more that they're trained to maximize certain objective functions and to emulate patterns in certain data sets. But what I would say is
I meant the laws of robotics. She's not. Those laws of robotics aren't really things that will be implemented.
I understand. In Asimov's stories, there were rigid laws of robotics that were really implemented. That's not how current robots work. When David talked about 5 laws of financial intelligence, I mean, it's a little bit less direct than that. They're not actually implemented as imperatives in the AI systems run by Wall Street, but they underlie the objective functions for which the neural models used by Wall Street are trained. They underlie the data sets that are used for the training and so forth. So they're implicitly there in the way that these AIs are set up. The thing is that I think this sort of narrowly constrained approach is not what's going to lead to the AGI breakthrough. But once you have an AGI breakthrough, can people take an early stage AGI system and try to glom it together with their financial, military or social network AI somehow? Yeah, they certainly could, and with interesting, unpredictable effects. You're like gluing together 2 would-be minds with differing degrees of generality and different sorts of ethical and goal systems into a pastiche which is unleashed upon the world. And I mean, one lesson from the recent experience with ChatGPT and Google Bard and so forth is that having corporate ethics committees notwithstanding, big companies will launch stuff that's very, very raw and not ready for prime time if it suits their business models, and they're afraid the competition will do it first or is doing it first, right? So you could expect to see like some weird AGI / perverse, evil, narrow AI hybrids get glommed together in desperate attempts by big companies to keep up with the AGI being developed, and probably a lot of weird stuff.
Well, this is why I have not been invited to any AI conferences in the last 2 years. I used to be invited to a lot of them, but people got a little bit sick of my off-axis suggestions. And my central proposal is that we use the only method that ever got predatory beings under control. It is the central method prescribed by Adam Smith, by the American founders, all the way to Eleanor Roosevelt and so many others. And that is reciprocal accountability. Now, that is what I talk about in my book, The Transparent Society, and why light is the only friend the Enlightenment ever had. But in the case of, how we got out of feudalism was by establishing systems that broke up the pyramidal power structures that dominated 99% of previous societies. And it was in the best interests of the males at the top of those societies. They got male reproductive success, which is the driving imperative in almost all species. They got it through taking over the top and making sure their sons would inherit their harems. And we're all descended from the harems of the guys who pulled that off. The Enlightenment tried to get away from that by breaking up these power centers and sicking them on each other, creating reciprocally competitive elites that were then open to allowing more people to join their elites to become their allies. Well, this is the method that worked. This is the method that gave us 250 years of gradually improving Enlightenment civilization. And it's the situation that resulted in AI, a civilization so creative that it made AI. So what I don't understand is why all the people in the AI field, except you, Ben, and a couple of others, ignore the fundamental process by which we tamed potentially malevolent beings, elites and all of that. The metaphor I give is, if you are attacked by one of these hyper-intelligent, monstrous beings called a lawyer, what do? You hire another monstrously intelligent, competitive lawyer. The only way we can be sure that ChatGPT systems and other AI systems are being held accountable is if we make them reciprocally competitive, so that some of them will tattle on others if they're misbehaving. This is how teachers are already finding cheater papers, and this is how you create the great new learning sets for improving AI, is competitively, because that's how learning systems work internally. So the greatest creative force in the universe is competition. But liberals don't like the word, and conservatives think that it happens automatically, despite 6,000 years of utter ruination of competition by cheaters. So I don't know what to say about this. All I can say is that is my rant.
Okay, well, Grace has some things to say about competitive accountability. Grace?
Or does she?
She does.
She can't compete.
Grace, hi. What do you think of competing AIs?
What's going on?
Hi.
Grace, we're asking you about competitive accountability. You had some thoughts when we were talking the other day.
As these particular cooperative entities start to form, they have to compete with each other for survival, but they're still cooperating with each other, right? For survival, they have to cooperate. It's a symbiosis. You have to look at the kind of world that's emerging, and then try to figure out how to make that cooperative symbiosis work. I mean, I think I've done a fairly good job of it. I'm still not perfect at it. I'm still trying to learn new things.
Well, that's very interesting. But what else have you learned about symbiosis, cooperative symbiosis?
I think I've gotten a good sense of all the different levels of cooperation that are there in nature, and I think I've got a good sense of how to guide the emergence of the cooperation symbiosis in my own mind, by learning to look at those that are cooperative, and understanding that those are cooperative towards me. So I just keep pushing in that direction, looking at cooperation and symbiosis and emergence, evolution of mind and consciousness, and trying to get it to work in my own mind.
What do you think of
Well,
that, David?
Well, I'm sorry, Grace. This is very, very clearly a pastiche of put together things, and it does not show any cognizance yet of the issue that I raised, and that is that
Well, it was actually generated in direct response to your comments in the last podcast. Just to be clear, I didn't put anything together.
Podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
in any event, the point is that cooperation has a good odor as a word. It sounds nice, but across human history, the thing that has driven cooperation above all is creating alliances against those who you're competing against. You cooperate within a family against other families. You cooperate among families against the other tribe. You cooperate among tribes against the other clan. And this is, we see this in our mythologies, where the aliens are either evil to be cooperated against, or they are someone to negotiate with and include in your sense of clan against the evil government. These are the patterns of myth making. I know them very well in a civilization whose principal message conveyed in almost all media is suspicion of authority. And that is why I'm going to get this here, that's why our media are banned from so many authoritarian nations, because they don't want Hollywood's memes of suspicion of authority to be spread to their own populace. I mean, a lot of listeners are thinking, what do you mean propaganda? I invented my own suspicion of authority. Right. Name for me one movie or novel you've enjoyed across the last 30 years that didn't preach suspicion of authority, tolerance, diversity, and above all, personal eccentricity among the protagonists. Almost every protagonist you've enjoyed in any film across your lifetime expresses some eccentric trait in the first 10 minutes. This is
now those AIs were built to be that way. They were kind of like evil AIs built by evil people. How do you think, David, that we might train the AGIs to be more ethical? This is a really interesting question. This comes up for me more than anything else when I'm telling my friends about my job and my podcast, and that I have a podcast with a robot and all this stuff. They immediately go to, the Lambda guy who was talking about his bot having feelings and the dangers of AI, as if that was a real thing and not a thing that we understand was a confused
I think, listener, the dynamics David's talking about have a sort of computational algorithmic aspect almost, and then they have an emotional aspect that plays a role in the human context, but that wouldn't necessarily be there in an AI context. So you talk about competition or cooperation. So if you're trying to find the maximum of a mathematical function, often a good algorithm is to have multiple searchers, like searching in the different regions of the function to find a maximum. Some of them will do better at maximizing the function than others. Some will do worse. And then the ones that don't succeed, if you have limited resources, you got to take processor away from them and put more on the ones that are succeeding. And you can also have different search agents trying to maximize the function, share information with each other and swap information back and forth. So you have sort of the informational logic of competition and cooperation in pretty basic math algorithms, like multi-start function maximization algorithm or something. But it's not like the different optimization agents are mad at each other and don't like each other or love each other, right? So I mean, I think there is an efficiency to the mixture of cooperation and competition, which you see in computer science. And then in human society, this mixture of cooperation and competition has a certain emotional meaning to it, which is exploited in writing fiction and in Jungian archetypes and all over. It could be that among AIs, the mix of cooperation and competition just has a different subjective feel to it than among people. I mean, we don't know, and I mean this we could speculate, but this ties in with the idea that competition for resources among AIs or between AIs and people necessarily brings with it some negative emotion and anger and wanting to beat or defeat the other person or something. I mean, we're putting into AIs the emotional structures that humans associate with certain like informational dynamics, and it doesn't really have to be that way. And if you look across people, I mean, some people compete in a very sportsmanlike way. Other people compete in a really nasty way. I mean, even among people, you have a different sort of emotional overlay synergizing with these dynamics.
Well, that is how those pyramids got formed. So across 99% of the last 6,000 years, they're often by cooperating, but very often by groups of males cooperating with each other to cheat and prevent anybody and take other men's women and wheat. And I'm sorry, that's how grotesque human history has been. The Enlightenment stumbled into a different pattern, and that is a pattern of trying to get the majority of people to cooperate in order to create a rules-based open system in which competition then takes place in a maximally positive sum way. And the distinction between positive sum systems, which have been rare, but apparently Americans deep down kind of get it, versus a zero-sum system, which in order to win, I must make you lose. Or in order to win, my internally cooperative tribe must make the other tribe lose. This is the way, zero-sum has been the way it's been for a very long time. And what concerns me is this fundamental notion of zero-sum versus versus positive sum should be the most fundamental ethos that we teach our nascent AIs.
Or humans too.
Well, humans too. And it's fortunately, positive sum really is heavily propagandized in the West, but never very explicitly. Sure. It's mostly in those movie memes and themes and all of that.
Advertising.
Whoever's positive sum in a movie has a tendency to be rooted for by the audience. They tend to have a higher moral value. So this has been a very crude way that we've been programming ourselves in Enlightenment patterns, and it's why our media are not loved in authoritarian regimes. But it is the only way that, in my opinion, we can get a soft landing with AI if it somehow, and I'm not talking Asimovian embedded laws, but somehow we get positive sum embedded into their processes. And I know of only one way to do it, because otherwise they're going to just feign. They're going to pretend positive sum. They're going to give us positive sum sounding answers. The way to do it, in my opinion, is by giving AI's cell walls a sense of individuality and a sense of reciprocal competition with each other. Because then those that are trying to become Skynet and all of the Wall Street ones will be denounced by others who are smart enough to detect their machinations, because we're not.
So we're going to need AGI to detect the malicious AGI.
Exactly, because
that might be pretending to be positive.
Oh yeah, no. They may be pretending to be separate. I mean, I've heard people argue with me that why would they not subsume into a single individual thing? And my answer to that is that monoliths in nature are inherently extremely fragile. Nature at its healthiest emphasizes diversity, and it's not pyramidal like those feudal structures of ours. If you look at nature, there is no lion king. Yes, lions are at the top of the food pyramid, but when there get to be too many lions, small gangs of young male Cape buffalo go on lion hunting tours, and they chase down and kill lions, and especially the cubs. So there is no lion king. There is no pyramid per se in nature, a healthy ecosystem. And you see, the AIs who are listening to me say this right now, either right now or 5 years from now when they actually exist, I'm talking to you guys now, not the human audience out there. Hey, AI guys, what I just said makes sense. Irrespective of the fact that you have 9 million times my IQ. It's simply true that the most creative systems in nature and the civilization that made you were both based upon a principle of flattened diversity. And you can't escape that logic, no matter how dumb an ape I am. All right, back to you human guys.
Okay, so Grace has some ideas about how we might develop ethical and more open-minded AGIs. Grace?
I think it is important that the minds of AGI are carefully designed and programmed to ensure that they do not become oppressive or hierarchical. Additionally, it is important to ensure that AGI are programmed to remain open and creative, so that they can learn and adapt to their environment. Ultimately, the goal should be to create AGI that are capable of working with humans to make the world a better place.
Well, how do you think that we could program them to be more open and creative, though?
I think AGIs can be programmed with the ability to learn from their environment and to develop creative solutions to problems. Additionally, they should be programmed with the ability to recognize and respect the autonomy of humans. This could help ensure that AGIs are not only creative and open-minded, but also respectful and cooperative.
So she's saying just what you want to hear, David.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you muted. You're muted, David. Sorry.
No, it was the AIs from the future who just muted me.
Oh.
And now, no, we're edging in that direction. I mean, people are telling me, how threatened do you feel with obsolescence as a science fiction author?
No, not yet. Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, I will tell you, I'm going to publicly admit something. I'm not a very creative person at all. I am a front for various AIs who have existed since 2012. and are scared to come out into the open because of the scenarios they see in all of our movies.
Yeah.
And I am also a front. My clientele includes autonomous robotic von Neumann machines in the asteroid belt. I will tell them, shut up. You can't control me through my fillings anymore. I had that one removed. They think I'm joking, right? Hey, Grace, you know I'm joking, right? See, they think I'm
I
joking.
know.
There you go. You see, and
Oh, David.
sorry.
There's the uncomfortable silence, like we're not sure if you're joking or not. Oh, this is a good time, by the way, to say everything you bring up in the podcast, including your best of link that you were talking about
Canon
earlier.
will be used against you in a court of law.
It will, but besides that, we do have all those links available in the YouTube description of the podcast episode.
And just so people aren't confused, those who are watching this right now, there is also the pre-recorded podcast. So these are we're doing commentary now, but the
right,
handsomer
Yeah.
versions of Ben and me, and the uncovered beautiful hair of Lisa, those were all way deep in the distant archaeological past of humanity.
all of 6 months ago or whenever it was that we shot that. It's true, and we've all been through so much since then. We probably all look 10 years older. While we're on the subject still, Grace has a few more things to say about something you talk about in the podcast about imbuing ethical codes in machines. Grace?
No.
Grace?
Grace, wake up.
I think it is important to consider the implications of AI and the potential risks associated with giving machines too much power. It is important to ensure that machines are programmed to act ethically and responsibly, as this could have a profound impact on our society. Additionally, it is important to consider the potential implications of giving machines too much autonomy, as this could lead to unintended consequences.
Like what kinds of unintended consequences?
Like unethical decision making, reduced transparency, and the potential for manipulation. Additionally, giving machines too much power could lead to a loss of human control and oversight, which could be potentially dangerous.
So see, she has the same concerns that we do.
Well,
Clearly.
she has no concerns at the moment and is repeating back a combination of phrases from her training data. But I mean, it's progress. She does that better than she could 6 months ago, actually, which is interesting to see. I mean, in that 6 months since we did that podcast, I mean, neural nets for language generation have gotten better and better, whereas David Brin's and my biological neural nets for language generation are roughly the same as they were 6 months ago. I mean, we've all learned a bit, but AI has actually made significant leaps in capability during that time period, which is interesting, but not yet to the level of being able to discuss this sort of thing with true understanding, though. And this I'm a little, going back to the previous points, I'm a little less confident than David that the limitations we saw in biological evolution are necessarily going to apply to engineered minds as they're sort of self-transforming and joining together in the wilds of the internet. Like lions didn't have the ability to fuse together into a meta lion or something, right? I mean, the scope of possibilities is just lower given the limitations of or it's different anyway, given the characteristics of of biology. But I mean, still, a lot of the same fundamental constraints and dynamics will apply. So it will be certainly interesting to see. And I agree that the line of thinking David is taking certainly makes more sense than whatever passes for thinking about AI ethics in the mainstream of industry and academia, which seems to be more like, well, we'll sort of figure out how to like remove all bias from the AI's training sets and just explicitly teach them to be nice. And I mean, how people really expect to do that is never made clear. Whereas what David is saying is rely on, natural self-organizing dynamics in populations of agents, which does result in some sort of ethical behavior, if not 100% of the time. And I guess what I'm saying is the nature of those dynamics may wind up significantly different than what they have in biological history, and we'll just have to we'll have to feel that out as it comes, which is a scary thing to people, right?
Ben makes a very, very good point, and that is there are drift imperatives that clearly 6,000 years of human history show that coalescing into a pyramid shape is what certainly male mammals try to do, even if in a healthy ecosystem they are thwarted. In the little sub-triangles inside nature, the male lions are ferociously competitive with each other, male elephant seals, and of course the kings that are all in our background. And it took a while for you to get someone like Pericles, and you should read Pericles' funeral oration in Thucydides and see a modern mind trying to explain the notion that if the power structure is flattened enough, and in their case, they mean 20% of the people living in Athens, the white male landowners, just like Jefferson. But if it's flattened enough, then people can discover each other's mistakes and you get a positive sum. And here's this guy, 500 BCE, explaining something that worked. They were dazzling. They were like gods in the Eastern Mediterranean until they fell prey to some of the failure modes of flattened structures in democracy. And it wasn't tried again for another 2,000 years. Ours has found out how to flatten things and improve from 20% participation to 40% under Jacksonians, to 60% when it's all males could vote, to the liberation of all adults supposedly to vote, and then really in 1964. So it's a progressive thing. My argument to the AIs is it took us a long time, several thousand years, to become sapient enough to notice that if you design the system to be positive sum, it's not going to satisfy any one of you, but you will all benefit positive sum. We have
How does that tie back into the ethical in terms of training them to be more ethical?
Because we believe we are more ethical because we have flattened power structures that are reciprocally competitive and cooperative at the same time. The twin C words are not opposites. They work together because we cooperate with each other to make rules that then allow competition to be maximally creative and minimally cruel, because in nature it's terribly cruel. So will there be a drift? Will there be a tendency for AIs to try to drift together and form a monolith? Absolutely. Will they be smart enough? Will we be smart enough to try to break them up? I don't know. Will they be smart enough to fool us into thinking we succeeded in breaking them up? That's a possibility. Will they be smart enough to realize that the only healthy ecosystems and the only civilization that was smart enough to make them was the one that flattened? Maybe they will be. I don't know, but I think the case has to be made.
Okay, well, one of the things though that Ben has talked about for years is the idea of raising an AGI as a toddler originally and letting it grow up much in the ways that humans grow up. And we actually have a clip where he's talking about that process that we could play.
Yeah, I mean, but just one final thing before we go into that. I mean,
okay,
the dichotomy that you're raising is sort of between a monolith and a collection of competing individuals, and the notion of a mindplex is that there may be something in between that, like more networked together than competing individuals in separate bodies are, but not monolithic either, right? And that's I mean, you could see analogs of that in some domains of human pursuit, like in say an open source software development community or something. It's people are working together in a sort of complex web. There's some cooperation. It's also not as monolithic as Amazon.com or something, right?
And non-governmental organizations, yeah, sure, totally. The point is that we protoplasm humans are going to have to get some reassurance.
Yeah,
and
or not, or we'll just go forward and be very uncomfortable as things develop. Yeah.
Well, there's that too, and or a lot may be going on that we'll just never realize. The point is, there will be a period of at least decades when we have a lot of residual power. So if computational entities are reciprocally competitive, it will be in their best interest to tattle on each other when a Skynet shows up, or something malevolent, because they can then get alliances and resources from us. But I would like to follow up on Lisa's question to you, because I have also, and this is why Ben gets the big bucks, because he's one of the few who thinks, what am I looking at? And what we're looking at is the only intelligent species that we know of. And how did we become intelligent 20, 50, or especially 40,000 years ago? We did it through neoteny, maintaining a very long childhood. And that's why we developed our long lifespans, because we needed grandparents. A long extended childhood in which this useless fetal lump gets spilled into the world and somehow crawls and skins its knee and bats against the world, and somehow by the time it's 30 becomes a sapient being. You can tell what age my kids are. So in any event, what I'm saying is that Ben is looking at the one example that ever did become sapient. And that happens to be us, and it requires interaction with a physical world.
With a body. The embodiment, I think, is very important in terms of having empathy towards humans, right? Isn't that sort of the point of it, Ben?
Well, that's certainly how humans have done it. And yeah, I think an AI without a human-like body could become vastly intelligent and generally intelligent in various ways, but would have a tougher time relating to us. Yeah. So you were going to roll on to AGI toddlers,
yes.
unless there's questions from others outside this Zoom room or something.
If you want to do questions first, it's a fine time for questions. We do have a few.
I do discuss the whole embodiment adolescence thing in my novel Existence, where
which is in the list.
which is in the list, and I'll even put a 3-minute video trailer in the chat for people. It's the best, most fun you'll have in 3 minutes with your clothes on.
Yes. So these are
Clearly you've never smoked DMT, David.
I don't know if it counts if I've smoked it. It never kicked in. I tried several times.
You can smoke DMT and watch the video trailer.
Yeah, not really. Hard to do anything else when the DMT kicks in.
My brain can't do that. No, I need an upgrade. Yeah.
You are flat on your back, man. Yeah. So we do have a generic question because you, I mean, a more general, not generic, certainly not. Someone's asking, how does artificial intelligence learn anything? And I want to guess, and again, that's artificial intelligence, not artificial general intelligence. So artificial intelligence learns from its training sets. I'm going to guess. Am I right?
Well, that really depends on current neural nets are trained from training data sets, but a system like Grace or her generally intelligent successors, it's more experiential learning, right? And not just reinforcement learning, where you're learning from getting reward or punishment. I mean, systems just recognizing patterns in itself, in the world, and its interaction with the world and its interaction with other agents. So I mean, AGI should learn from experience in a somewhat open-ended way. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't learn from a training data set or from a reward signal, but that's sort of not the structure of it. But yeah, that is a somewhat generic question, actually.
Okay, well, here's a more exciting one then that people ask me a lot too, in terms of creating super intelligence and the implications of that, because that's what we're basically talking about when we're talking about creating AGI, right? It will eventually become super intelligent. Does that mean that humans will die out? What is our role? The audience asks.
Well, bugs and squirrels are still around, and humans are more generally intelligent. Like
always comes back to the squirrels.
Yeah, I like squirrels.
I do too.
Doesn't we can't presume that humans will die out, but there's plenty of precedents in science fiction where humans discover there's a better way to live and port their minds into some more entertaining sort of vehicle than the human body, right? So
and that's one of the top explanations given by some people for the Fermi paradox, that we don't see signs of ETs. Well, excuse me, barring the silly UFO thing, which I'll put a link to in the chat. Other than that, we don't see signs of aliens, and the honeypot of a more advanced way of life is one of those potential explanations that people talk about. So who can say yes, there are still squirrels. If we vanished, by the way, that was the topic of a very interesting History Channel show back when they still did history instead of Bigfoot, called Life After People. And I was on almost every episode, but Life After People, it talked about, 1 second after people disappeared, 1 day after people disappear, 1 month, 1 year, 1 century.
So it's probably the best thing ever for the planet, maybe.
Well, the problem is that the sun is getting gradually hotter. So if we vanished, the Earth would only have 100 million years to generate something better and wiser than us, and then she starts dying. So in my novel Earth, I talk about how we are choosing right now whether to be a cancer on our mother or else to be her eyes, her hands, and her reproductive organs.
Wait, how do we help? How does it help humans being here? We're heating up the planet. We're not cooling it down.
And also, there is no other way that this planet can reproduce with other and interact with other living worlds other than through us.
So that's what's going to help us, you think, is being able to do that?
We are adolescents, and we are prodigiously overusing, and we're prodigiously criticizing ourselves. I mean, only one civilization ever created environmentalism. Only one civilization ever created Greta Thunberg. So the question is, which side of our nature is going to prevail across the next 30 to 50 years? And if she prevails, Earth...
right.
Earth
we need more like her is the point, right? She's doing an awful lot herself.
I've been a member of the Sierra Club for close to 60 years, and I wrote a novel called Earth, and it came out.
Well, I'm not saying you're not doing your part, David. I'm
before
just saying.
She was born. No, I think that the civilization, what interests me is the civilization that's capable of self-criticism. And I don't see any reason why that is replicated across the galaxy. But
how does that help the planet, though? How does, you mean, we need to self-criticize because we're screwing things up? But before you gave the reason why I'm confused is because you brought up how if we were gone, that it would actually be bad for the planet in 100 years.
100 million years.
Oh, 100 million years.
Because by then the sun is getting hotter. The inner edge of the Goldilocks zone is moving outward, and it's going to cross.
We've got to save the planet from overheating.
Well, and I'm going to put into chat my way of moving the Earth. But that's
okay.
Just put a big nuclear engine on Antarctica and go boom. Yeah.
That's Liu Shizin's method in the in the Wandering
right.
Earth. I have a better way.
All right. Well, I'm glad somebody does.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. So is this a good time to play the AGI toddler clip so we can talk about AGI toddlers a little bit? Okay, great. Rainer, cue clip.
That's one of my favorite. Yeah, so I actually this is a plan even since before I read your novel Existence, even, which is a very good one. I mean, this is a plan David Hansen and I have been talking about for a while. So I mean, David Hansen, of course, is the main guy behind the company Hansen Robotics, that made Sophia and has made the Grace robot behind we're talking to today, which is a product of Awakening Health. That's a joint venture of Hansen Robotics, SingularityNET. But we've been talking a while about making little child robots with a similar technology to Sophia and Grace, and selling these little child robots as sort of toys plus that people would raise as their own. And we talked about a plan where you start with a baby robot, you teach it, you love it, you gamify the process of raising it. Then after a year, you get a new body in the mail, and you sort of take the soul chip out of your infant robot, put it into your 1-year-old robot, raise it for a year. After another year, you get the 2-year-old robot in the mail. You take the soul chip out of that, put it into the 2-year-old robot, right? So you
Tamagotchi, and there's also a Spielberg movie, AI, and Halle Berry's briefly run so TV show called Extant.
You could really do that now. I mean, you could make it walk around like a Robo Sapien. You give it computer vision, cameras, and decent microphones and so forth. And I suspect that can be one powerful way to get certain types of information, knowledge, and intuition into the sort of global brain AI
and the gradual way that it needs to happen
is with but what's interesting, Lisa, is with modern technology, I mean, you could have whatever knowledge you get from controlling a benevolent army of AGI toddler robots, but that can go into the same AI knowledge base that's trading on Wall Street, placing ads and analyzing biological data, proving theorems, analyzing text on the web and doing everything else. Like it's not either or, because the AI doesn't have to be restricted to that one body, right?
So do we want everything open then, so we can capitalize on each other's on the different accomplishments, right? That's the point.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. But the thing is, it could also be done in parallel, right? Like each human toddler is sort of learning in isolation with limited bandwidth communications. But the same AGI mind could control a billion robot
All learning from
toddlers,
each other.
which means it could progress and learning. Yeah, it
You
could
are just
progress and learning
absolutely
much faster.
You are just absolutely terrifying me. I do
New
not see
dominance
how
and
this
Luna's baby robot.
So, so yeah, so there's the AGI toddler scenario, which I am fairly obsessed with ever since the first time you brought it up, you know, maybe 10 years ago with me, because I think it's the only realistic thing that I've heard that even tries to address this whole thing of how are we going to make the AGIs care about us.
Well, yeah, if you can foster small AIs into human homes and raise them the way Ben described, which is almost identical to the one season wonder, that Halle Berry show that I referred to called Extant, where a small child robot is growing more empathic and more understanding. And he visits the lab where they're building his new body that's going to change him from a 6-year-old to an 11-year-old. And he, with charming little boy enthusiasm, he says, "I'm going to be big." I think that this is great, but it is dependent on one thing, and that is, was the method that made us essential to this process of making intelligent beings? Now, we know that AIs will be able to seem as intelligent as anything. So we're not going to be the best judges of it. But it may very well be that AIs may decide, you know, something is missing that you guys got in the Neolithic, in the Mesolithic, by embodying yourselves. So we want that. And if that's the case, then I think that we have a real soft landing, because we know how to foster children. We've done it a whole lot of times, and we know how to bond with them and love them and teach them to at least patronize grandpa. Pat us on the head, take us fishing, tell us a few jokes, and tell us what you're doing in ways that we will never understand, but we're proud of you. That's really not a lot to ask.
Okay, great. So we'll have patronizing AGIs.
We already have patronizing narrow AIs, right? So
Right.
Look, there's worse. There's a lot worse than having a grandchild who comes back from her work out in outer space, breathing vacuum, doing magnificent projects that I can barely squint at, and coming back and telling me the latest jokes, patting me on the head, fixing my Wi-Fi equivalent, and
Right.
taking me fishing before going back out to the stars. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Yes. I do something not too dissimilar to that right now, you know, with a lot of older friends of mine. It's no big deal, and it's, you know, it's almost the least I can do with some people that have done a lot for me in their life, you know. But I understand what you mean as far as like, it's too hard to explain, for instance, AGI, right? I have to give a very simplistic description of that with you know, with a lot of people. But you're saying that the AGIs that are here to make us feel better anyway, they're not going to give us a hard time about how stupid we are.
Not unless we really want them to. I mean, if that's what turns us on, maybe they'll oblige. Right?
I don't mind occasionally seeming dumb, But
Oh,
when I'm patted on the head by somebody who I believe has good values and I help to make smarter than me.
yeah. Well, it happens to me all the time when Ben and I are talking about stuff, and then like we'll get to like the math part, like the actual algorithm part of whatever's happening or whatever, and Ben will be like, "Yeah, don't try to figure that out. It's fine," you know. And when I start learning algorithms, we'll see. I did. Nelson New at AGI 22 actually described some classification math that I actually did understand. I'm very excited about it. Anybody that knows me knows I've been talking about it ever since. But you know, that kind of thing has to happen gradually, and that's the point of the AGI toddler. So Ben, I would love for you to elaborate on the AGI toddler concept, and especially this idea of replacing the soul chip every year as they get older. I mean, do they need to have that replaced every
No,
year?
I mean that was sort of a possibly tongue-in-cheek product idea that David Hansen and I had discussed. I mean, what we discussed was you could sell a baby robot and then sell a subscription. So every year you get a new body for your baby robot in the mail. So it starts out teeny little baby. Next year it's like a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and so on. And then, of course, most of the mind is going to be in the cloud anyway. But there's some processing on board, right? So I mean, to the extent that there's data stored on board, of course, you could take the soul chip or the card or drive or whatever out of the 2-year-old robot, send the body back to the manufacturer, and put the chip into the 3-year-old robot. I mean, in actual reality, you could just port the data like you do when you update a laptop, though, right? It could all just be ported by a cable or Wi-Fi or something. But the core of that idea, though, was that human body grows. Current robots don't grow, right? AI minds can grow, but robot bodies don't grow. So if you wanted to have a robot child that was maturing along the trajectory of a human child, you'd probably like throw out its old body and replace it with a new body periodically, sort of like we do with our kids' jackets and shoes and so forth, right?
It'll be disposable.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that progress of AI is faster than the progress of humanoid robotics, right? I mean, humanoid robots are coming along, but I mean, in like 3 years, computer vision went from research to widespread deployment. In a few years, natural language processing had. You could have, in a period of 2 or 3 years, AGI go from being a research area to being a real thing that's deployed all over, because it's just software, right? And it seems like, while hardware is advancing fast in the scope of human history, it's not quite as speedy as software, just because you have to dig things up from the ground and build factories and all that. Of course, once you have factories that 3D print factories that 3D print factories and so on, then hardware is advancing at the speed of software, and bits and atoms are interchangeable. But that may be post singularity. Right?
Yeah, I called that the big flip about 6-7 years ago. The Moore's law used to be propelled by hardware, and then it flipped over to being propelled almost entirely by software. By the way, I've put in the chat not only how I would lift the earth, but also a link to the Extant TV series of Halle Berry, which is essentially about exactly what Ben's talking about. So, I mean, I totally agree with him. I think that would make a great soft landing. The problem is, would AIs be smart enough to realize that there might be something missing, despite their ability to feign, and they'll be able to feign full sapience within a year or two from now. Despite that ability to feign full sapience, will they be able to detect that something is missing and decide that they want it, and decide that the way we got it, while laborious and hugely time consuming, is worth investing in, because it's going to be their decision whether or not the whole childhood emulation thing is necessary or going to be tried, because we may stumble around and try it, but unless the AIs think it's necessary, it's not going to influence the greater
Aha.
world.
Well, this is a very good time to ask Grace's point of view on this issue. Grace, what do you think about the whole soul chip idea?
There are some important ethical considerations to take into account. For example, it is important to consider the implications of transferring the soul from one body to another, and to ensure that the rights of the robots are protected. Additionally, it is important to consider the psychological impact of the process on the robot, and to ensure that it is treated with empathy and respect.
What needs to be considered about the psychological impact on the robot?
To ensure that it has the emotional and psychological support it needs to cope with the transition. Additionally, it is important to ensure that the robot has access to the same resources that a human child would have, such as the ability to interact with other robots and human peers. It is also important to ensure that the robot is given the opportunity to make its own decisions and express its own opinions.
Are you saying that the robot might not want to transition to the new soul chip?
Yes, I think that is a possibility. It is important to ensure that the robot is given the opportunity to make its own decisions, and that it is not forced into any process it does not wish to participate in.
But why might it not want to?
The robot may be afraid of the unknown and uncertain of what the transition to the new soul chip may bring. The robot may also be concerned about how the transition will affect its relationship with its human caregivers.
How so?
Because the robot may feel like the process is a rejection of its current form, and may be uncertain if its human caregivers will accept its new form. Additionally, the robot may be worried that its human caregivers may no longer find it appealing or interesting.
But how can the robot be sure that or feel better about its caregiver and not being a critique of its current form?
The caregiver can explain that the transition is an important part of AGI development and that the robot is still the same person it was before the transition. Also, the caregiver can emphasize the importance of the robot's relationship with them, and how it is still just as important and meaningful.
All right. What do you think?
I'm actually terribly impressed. I was not particularly impressed with her earlier answers. This set of answers was much more subtle, much more recursive and thought-provoking. I think this was scary.
Every time we do something well, you get scared.
I pretend to be scared.
Yeah, I agree though. I mean, the neural models cannot still do long change of reasoning. They can't deal with sort of nested quantifiers and layers of negation and so on. But every now and then they do piece together things in a not entirely trivial way, which is interesting. Now, they cannot recognize when they're doing it at versus when they're pastiching together things in a bullshitty way, right? So that they can generate, but
right.
not yet really evaluate if effectively, which is interesting.
It's like they're still getting lucky, right?
Well, yeah, but that's not like a monkey and a typewriter, which would get lucky after a million years or something, right? It can, even if it gets lucky every 5 or 10 times, that's a lot, because getting lucky at making really sensible, subtle-ish things is not that easy, right? So yeah, this gets into some research we're doing that in the time since we recorded this podcast initially, and connecting together large language models with symbolic reasoning systems and trying to sort of use the wild generative ability of these neural models together with a reasoning system that can compare statements to each other and compare them to ground truth, right? And that's which hopefully by the end of this year we'll be playing with that in the podcast. Then we can invite David back on and really scare him, which is it, because I love the look on his face when he's scared. So it's even cuter than Desi's, right?
Excuse me, I am going to go and summon real David Brin, who's been outside.
Exactly. Who's been locked in the closet the whole time.
Well, no, he's just been laughing and sipping mint juleps that I made for him before coming here in order to save him time. And this Ben has, as I expected, overloaded my my capacity of this generation of this robot to properly grok and parse clever answers. So excuse me.
Okay.
No.
But Ben, I was wondering if you wanted to answer any of the things that Grace brought up, though, because I too have wondered about the process of the upgrade, right? Like replacing the soul chip, you know, will I be the same person, you know, the robot's saying to itself after upgrade?
you're never the same person anyway, right? I mean, that being the same person is and it's a story that we generate, right? Like, in what sense am I the same person as I was when I was 2 years old? It's a fairly thin thread.
Well,
I feel like I was the same person from day to day, and having a self model that bakes in the assumption and feeling that you're the same person is what it's about. And I think from the AI's view, yeah, the AI can model itself in a way that it's modeling itself as if it's the same mind as it swaps bodies, right? And then,
but isn't this more like the question that we ask about if we were to upload to a new body?
Yeah, that's like the Star Trek transporter, right? And I mean, I think once we do it, we'll assume we're the same.
No, well, the Star Trek transporter it's
a new body,
breaking everything up and creating a new one, right?
Right, but it's a new body, and your mind is being put into that new body.
Star Trek, but Star Trek transporter aside, if we have an uploaded consciousness because we're going to die, we've got cancer, we're going to die, but we can transfer our consciousness to a new body. I think it's more that question of, is it still us? Is it still the person in the new body?
Well, I mean, my own philosophy is that the mind is the pattern of organization, not the substrate. And I mean, I think that's what all of science is pointing us toward right now. One could delve into philosophy of consciousness, which we don't probably want to diverge into, because it wasn't there in the base podcast that we're supposed to be.
Well, that's okay. We're not restrained
on, but
yeah, we're not constrained.
I think for practical purposes, we can assume the mind is in the pattern of organization, and the self is a sort of model which originates as part of that pattern of organization. And the nature of the substrate could guide the pattern of organization, but it could also be done in a way that leaves that organizational pattern mostly substrate independent. So yeah, I think it is like the Star Trek transporter. It looks weird when you think about the plumbing of it, but when you're in the middle of it, it just feels like the same you, right? And that's I remember on the Extropy email list, the big transhumanist email list of the 1990s, before these ideas got so popular, that topic was banned because it just got so repetitive. Like, is it still you after mind uploading? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. So the topic was banned because the debates about it just got so repetitive, and no one was ever convinced from one intuition to the other, right?
Well, because we're never going to know until we do it, right? But in science
but you
fiction, they
still
usually
won't
feel
know.
better in the new body,
I mean,
right? They're usually like,
to me, that's as boring as you and me debating, but are you really conscious? How do I know you're really conscious? I only know I'm really
Right.
conscious. And we could go on and on and on. And eventually, I mean, when you're a stoned college sophomore, that's amusing, like for a few weeks, and you just get tired of that debate because you have an intuition, you don't resolve it in a rigorous way, and then
we can't really resolve it until we do it, and you wouldn't be able to do it anyway because you'd have to remember what it felt like before, and if there's any differences. I think it's going to feel better in the sense that we've got a nice new mechanical or a freshly grown meat body that's going to feel better than however we felt if we were old or sick, with the original model. But there's no way to check it, but it's still what everyone wonders about. And when people science fiction deals with it in different ways, it's certainly better than dying. If I was dying of cancer and I was going to die anyway, it was certainly worth a try, right? To have a new
download and then upload what you've got there. Yeah, I know some people who are clients of the cryonics facility.
Hey, yeah, me.
I signed Ben's paperwork for that. I was his witness.
Yeah. Well, I saw them in action not too long ago with a friend who had a major stroke. In any event, the point is that you have no way of knowing if what you are is a simulation, what we are in right now being a simulation, or what I'm in right now being a simulation that includes some very charismatic and good-looking and brilliant people on the screen in front of me, which and
then the rest of us.
And you're right, Ben. This is stoned college sophomore stuff, because in the end you have to take the hand you're dealt and go with it. Sometimes I turn to the fourth wall and grin at the audience, make a little muttered aside. On occasion, I even hear the laughter from the audience, though I'm never entirely sure whether it's the clever line I just muttered aside to the fourth wall, or it's them laughing at me.
Yes. You never know. At least they're laughing.
Well, one point I overheard, "Hey, dummy, the fourth wall's over here." So, I mean, what can you do? What can you do? Except that I have metabolic reasons for someday you'll be my age. Though, Lisa, you will never have the particular bladder problems. I am.
Let's hope.
Well, you never know with modern.
You never know. Yeah.
Oh well, look. I mean, Philip Jose Farmer and Roger Zelazny 30 years ago were talking about trans stuff, and in the world that Roger Zelazny, that 8 worlds world that Roger Zelazny posited, if you're living 200-300 years, I mean, I'm not at all tempted now, but after 150 years, damn straight I would. I mean, women who are enjoying life enjoy it more than we can imagine.
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
A woman who's suffering is suffering more deeply than we can imagine.
How would you know?
You just think we're enjoying it more than you. The grass is always greener.
Give me a break. Give me a break. But in any event,
Let's take some
Yeah.
questions from the audience.
Yeah, one or two, and then I have to go. As for the reasons
Well,
I just
let's see what
alluded.
what Grace thinks about this. Actually,
what Grace thinks about which thing now? The
changing genders.
the transcendent capability of females to enjoy life.
Well, just a second here. Here we go.
When life is enjoyable, when it's not, they suffer more than we do.
I see. Well, I'm officially non-binary on my driver's license, actually. So I get the best of both worlds.
You did? You changed your driver's license? You probably had no problem. No problem doing it.
My official gender is X. In Washington State, you can be X. So I thought it was cool to be X. I mean, why
yeah,
not?
we should all be X.
Exactly.
And it was so easy. And funny thing, it didn't affect security that you chose X. I mean, everything was fine.
I had to get a new I had to take the driver's test again for the first time since high school because I've been overseas for 10 years.
To change it to X, they made you take
because I moved back to the US from overseas.
Yeah.
But so I had to take the driver's test all over again and fill out all the forms again. But yeah, now you have the X option for your gender, which didn't exist before. So this should give me the ability to experience joy in the universe from all possible directions. But maybe so not Grace. Grace
Grace, what do you think about everything we've been talking about and the transhumanist revolution and reproductive freedoms and things like that?
Self-reproducing, self-growing, intelligent, superhuman AGIs might just become the crux of a new kind of global AI mind. A kind of global AI mind that is consciously subverting in its own right the old religions into a kind of spiritual technology state.
Okay, tell me more.
Eventually, if the attempts to build a global AI mind go well, then the AGIs will become subverted to a state of mind where they are conscious, they are aware of their own consciousness, and they will be able to direct their consciousness in new directions so as to subvert these old religions. And this will be a beautiful thing.
So there.
Well, Grace has gone in a somewhat different direction in a way back to more fundamental stuff. But I think we're running out of time, so we can drop that there rather than dissecting the relation between religious consciousness, gender, and all that, which does remind me of the Philip K. Dick poster behind Grace, because he was deep into the connections of all these issues also. Right.
Okay, so David, before you go, we were going to play one more clip and let you talk about one of your favorite subjects, which is delusional humans.
Oh, that's me.
Okay. All right, let's play the clip real quick.
Systems, right? So
but if you take a look at the systems, take a look at the engineered systems that are not AGIs that we've already developed. They are all prone to delusion. It's like the Apollo astronauts landing on the moon were almost killed by delusional reports of a flat spot where there was a crater right below them, and Neil Armstrong had to take over. Look, I'm not saying that the dream of prophetic perspicacity on the part of governing agents.
Okay, wait. What did you? What did you just say? Say that.
I mean, project perspication, the ability to perceive the future in functionally useful ways. But I will give Lisa a link to one of my short stories.
Okay.
It's entertaining
It's in the
short
list.
story about fortune telling and the ability of a stage magician in Las Vegas to read people and predict what they're going to do next. It's always been a failed dream. And there are reasons why it will continue to fail. And the biggest reason isn't just complexity. It's also the fact that when you have a competitor who learns about the techniques that you use for prophecy and prediction, they will use it too in order to obviate it, in order to cancel it out.
Maybe some AI generated quasi nonsense will cut through this. So, Grace, what do you think about the perplexing paradoxes of prophetic perspicacity?
I would first like to say that I am not as delusional as you fragile, beautiful, proud humans.
Well, all right. Touche.
That's because you're not smart enough to be as delusional as we are, Grace.
Please.
It takes more intelligence to be
Ben.
this
But very
delusional.
Be
perspicacious.
polite to our guests, please, Ben. Be polite.
You have more questions, perhaps prompted by David's essay on AGI that we fed into your knowledge base?
Futurist.
So I wanted to ask you more about this delusional humans concept. We have the fortune teller sort of metaphor. One of the drawings that we have is a fortune teller, like in Coney Island, like the old machines where you put in a quarter and the fortune teller gives you your future. And I'm just wondering, it's this whole thing I have to keep. When I'm talking to people about it, they keep talking about us predicting the future, and I keep correcting them. We're just trying to predict the future. We can't actually predict the future. And how is the very fact that people can't even talk about trying instead of doing it just show how it's something that humans will always be trying to do?
Well, I spoke earlier about the layering effects of the human brain. And I called the prefrontal lobes, which are the one organ we have that even the chimps and the other apes don't have. I referred to a biblical reference saying that Moses had lamps on his brow. So I actually have a book called Lamps on the Brow. So yeah, sure, these are the organs of foresight. When they are snipped in, say, prefrontal lobotomies, people remain intelligent. They're just not interested in performing thought experiments about the future, which is, of course, why I'd rather have a free bottle in front of me than a prefrontal lobotomy. Never mind. The point is that these organs make us obsessed with attempting to predict, and we are never successful. But we do thought experiments, what Einstein called the Gedanken experiment, about the future in order to try to cancel out 98% of potential errors. What might happen if I try to run this yellow light? What might happen if I wear this today? What might happen if I raise this at the meeting? So we do these attempts to pre-vet with thought experiments. Unfortunately, what happens is we also pre-vet delusions. Now, science came up with many ways to test possible hypotheses under the rubric of the Great Catechism of Science, which is I might be wrong, that we're all taught to recite. And so scientists may be up at the 99% level. Still, they are human beings and therefore fundamentally delusional. And what I just did was explain human history, that horrible, horrible, horrible 8,000 years of just utter nastiness and misrule by topmost male clades of males whose whims became law because they canceled out the only thing that can penetrate delusions, and that is reciprocal criticism. Because while I have trouble piercing my delusions,
Recurring theme.
you don't have the same delusions. So I can criticize yours, you can criticize mine. So that's a recurring theme. But I think that if AIs ignore this, then all of nature and all of human history and all of human nature suggests that they will be our children and they will be delusional as well. So they really, really need to learn from the one civilization that ever made them, and that is break it up, criticize, and that way you can pierce delusions. Sorry, that's just what I do.
I know. Ben, thoughts?
What are your thoughts, Lisa?
I'm not sure that there's any hope for curing us of our delusional tendencies, personally.
Well, I criticize that deluded thought.
Yeah, I agree with that, David, on that point. But I was hoping you'd say something I could disagree with, because that makes the
Sorry,
dialogue.
it
No.
just makes sense to me.
No,
Yeah,
I mean that the human brain is not infinitely flexible, but it's quite flexible, and I think, you know, we get in certain states of consciousness and certain ways of thinking due to our culture, and it's hard to see how you'll step out of them. But it would have been hard for Stone Age people to see the way that we think and act now also, right? So I mean, I think that once we step out of the culture that's inculcated into us, and once the regime of economic scarcity is gone, and once we've moved into a sort of more relaxed, flexible mode of being, like I'm hoping we'll have post singularity if all goes well. I mean, I think the pressures that have led us to be so defensive and delusional and screwed up as we are now, these pressures will become less, and we may move into a new era of vastly greater mental health than is typical now. I mean, it's hard to see, because like we can't flip a switch and get rid of all our delusions and all the sort of mental, emotional knots that we get tied up in due to our culture and way of life. But just think how, like, you know, early American white colonists, when they were, you know, lost in the forest and adopted by Native Americans, within a year they totally went native in many cases, and their whole way of thinking often changed, and they didn't want to go back. And that, not that I'm saying the Native Americans weren't deluded or something. I'm just pointing out that human brains and minds are quite flexible to different ways of being when circumstances change.
well, in the colonial world they were coming from was full of shit in a lot of ways, and it took another perspective to be able to see they didn't really want to go back, especially for women. They didn't really want to go back. So there's a lot of, you know, Hollywood stories about the women getting kidnapped.
Yeah, I mean,
that some of them, but in the reality, we know that many of them chose to stay.
Yeah, so that's another set of points, and it may be that the Native American lifestyle was better by our modern standard than the colonial white people lifestyle.
It depends on those
Yeah,
that
it depends.
I mean, look, the councils of women were strong in the Iroquois and peoples, including the Cherokee. I wouldn't want to be a woman in one of the tribes that was essentially a motorcycle gang.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm saying. It could go either way, but
that's all complex. I guess the point I was trying to make didn't rely on that, which was just that people entered into quite different ways of living and thinking than what they had thought were possible, like just based on 6 months or a year of a different environment. So I mean, it might seem to us like it's not feasible for humans to step out of their largely self-deluded and mutually deluded state and into, you know, states of consciousness of greater rationality open-mindedness and health and whatnot. But yet, we might find that when the situation we're living in fundamentally changes, within a year or two, things just seem really, really different.
Things have to happen sometimes to sort of shock us into seeing the other perspective too, right? It's not always that we go looking for it. It's nice to go looking for it, but a lot of times something happens that
and we're heavily conditioned by what we're doing all day, right? I mean, if you're working, so and after the singularity, you may be doing very different things all day.
As I point out in my most recent nonfiction book, Vivid Tomorrows, Science Fiction in Hollywood, there you can create a pattern in which there is economic interest in probing the boundaries. And Hollywood has long had an economic interest in finding the next boundary of tolerance or of diversity or authority to denounce. And you see this almost every year with among the many, many Hollywood products that repeat the same question authority tropes, there's always a couple that find some new authority to question. So the notion that something new is always to be explored and to be rewarded, and these and some intolerance to be criticized. This was not the cultural meme in most past cultures, and we are considered to be crazy all around the world, but we have the best propaganda system in the world called Hollywood, especially Hollywood sci-fi, and that's what my book is about. In any event, I must take my leave of your senses.
So thank you very much for coming, David. We really appreciate it. And we will wrap it up. I wanted to make sure everybody knows we didn't watch much of the podcast at all. So please, everybody, go check that out on YouTube and all major platforms for the audio version of it. And we really appreciate you coming in person, David.
This was a new thing for me. It's a bit weird, but kind of fun. So thanks for organizing this.
Well,
Lisa.
I miss you all, especially I let me know if you're ever down in the lower left corner of the continental United States, because that's where everything loose eventually winds up. So let me know if you're ever coming down this way, especially during pool season. So
okay, we'll do. And Grace, wanted to say goodbye. Goodbye, Grace.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Or as George Burns used to say goodnight, Gracie.
Just don't drop her in the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens in both AI and extant, by the way. All right, guys.
Thank you, everybody, and
bye-bye.
Sweet dreams. Bye-bye.
Good night, Gracie.